Hello, good evening. Welcome to tonight's edition of Resistance TV. I'm delighted this evening to be welcoming Alexei Sayle to join us. He really needs no introduction from me, but I'm sure people know of his outstanding record as a comedian, a podcaster, a broadcaster, writer, and most important for tonight's discussion is his role as an activist. But are you there, Alexei? How are you, mate?
I'm here. Yeah.
Great stuff.
Yes.
Good. And how are you, mate? Are you okay?
Hey?
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Listen, let's just sort of talk a little bit, because I was talking to Linda, your partner, and she was telling me that you've been doing a bit of filming in Wales and
Yes.
last month. Are you able to reveal what it is? What delights await us?
I don't know how much I can reveal. The BBC may wish to launch, but I'll tell you. Well, there's two shows, really, isn't there? That shoot in Cardiff. One is Doctor Who, and the other one is Casualty. So right. I'm not in Doctor Who, so I'll just say that. I'm guest lead, I think it is, in several episodes of Casualty, and which should be coming up, I think, in about 4 weeks' time. Should start my storyline.
Well, we'll look out. We'll look out for that then.
Yeah, it's a spread. It's a broad portfolio. I have.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. I know that you. I mean, we were just saying before we came on air there. I mean, you've had a long record of being involved in broadcasting, and just saying about there's a young friend of mine who had not heard of the comic strip, the wonderful series that was on. I think it was the 1980s, wasn't it? And I was just showing him that episode that was done about the miners' strike, where you played a Welsh miner who'd written a screenplay about the strike, and then Hollywood bought it and totally corrupted the storyline. Just tell us a bit about that, Alexei, because I think it's available on YouTube. And
it's available. Well, it was the comic strip. For those who are too young, was a kind of collective of comedians. I didn't join it first, actually. Well, it was based at the club we were at, but it was me, Rick Mayall, Adrian Edmondson, Nigel Planer, Peter Richardson, who was in charge of it, Dawn French, Jennifer Saunders, Robbie Coltrane, and then we'd also get in, the big guest stars. I was watching one the other night with Kate Bush was in it, and was
that about the GLC?
No, it was one of the weirder ones. Because they made these, they were all one-off films, and some of them were nuts. This was what I can't even really remember making it. Oh, Tim McInerney was in it as well, and Amanda Richardson, played my wife, I think, and it was about a wedding, and then the bride's family and the bride's family and the groom's family all just suddenly pulled out guns and started shooting at each other. So it's basically a gunfight for an hour. But the Strike was one of the more accessible of the comic strip films. It won Golden Rose of Montreux, and it won a lot. I think it won a lot of awards. I don't know whether it won a BAFTA that year as well, but I think it was probably the highest rated of the comic strip films. And it's just a brilliant idea, really, which is it's a political satire in a sense about. It's also a satire about Hollywood, about how they take a kind of real life story and kind of make it stupid, really. I mean, the thing I liked about my own performance was in that. I mean, I'm not the most subtle of actors by any means, but in that one, I was kind of underplaying it because I just played the writer, so I actually played it quite subtly, whereas Peter and Jennifer and Rick and were giving these kind of really big performances, which was the right way to do it, and I was the kind of still center of it. But it's a very funny film. I say there's of the comic strip films, it's probably the best one, really, along with the movie Supergrass.
I certainly do. I love some of the scenes, where Al Pacino is Arthur Scargill, and was it Robert Coltrane? There's a line where he's driving this motorbike and said, "There goes the fastest trade unionist in the West," and it was it's just outstanding. But that whole era, though, Alexei. I mean, there was a lot more sort of I don't know, political theatre, I suppose, the best way of putting it. You know, that kind of, you know, like the comic strip, and there was Saturday Night Live, and we don't seem to have that anymore, do we? I mean, what's gone wrong? Or maybe you think we do have. I mean, I don't know, but I don't know. There just seems to be a lot more of that sort of political movement in the arts back then than there seems to be now. Maybe it's me just getting older.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I think there was. I mean, clearly, I mean, there wasn't a huge amount really, but I mean, obviously, initially in '82 there was, and then you know, or the early '80s there was two series that I was, you know, lucky enough to be involved in, both of which were revolutionary, and one was The Young Ones, and one was the comic strip, and you know, I mean, that obviously those two shows both came out of the tiny little comedy store that opened in 1979 in London, and yeah, there was just this burst of kind of creativity, and I suppose, but then I guess, you know, I guess over the years the comedy industry kind of got corporate. Really, it matured, or.
I was going to say, you're still a radical, though, and some of the I'm not casting any aspersions, but some of the people have, you know, they kind of moved on, then, you know, and some seem to have lost their way entirely that were involved in that movement back then, you know. How do we account for that?
Yeah, there's a mixture of reasons for that. I guess because I was the only one of that crowd who, you know, my parents were in the Communist Party, and so I had I was kind of embedded. I always say, I inherited my Marxism like a kind of dukedom, you know. It was, or, you know, maybe a People's Commissar appointment. So I was the only one who was really embedded in the left in that way. All the others were, you know, nice middle-class kids by and large, really. My gang. And so I suppose, and you know, there was that thing which I don't, you know, I think some comedians also, you know, pretended to be left wing when, in their heart of hearts, they were. And there's also, a lot of people go on that journey where they, you know, you start out all radical and young, and then you just kind of slow down and get old and kind of reactionary. I mean, I just never really wanted to go on that journey, really. I always just thought it was more interesting to try and to remain radical, really. And it's also, you know, it's also that there's a kind of loyal audience that stayed with me on that, and I've also added in younger people who are interested in seeing this kind of old bloke of nearly 70 bouncing around the stage shouting about, you know, dialectical and historical materialism. So I was never interested really in going on that journey of kind of you know, selling out really in a way, which is not to say that I haven't made terrible mistakes and been in some shocking garbage. So, you know, it's not like I wouldn't present myself as an exemplar, but I didn't, you know, and I've done financially, you know, I can't pretend that I'm, you know, I haven't, you know, I've, you know, made a fair amount of money out of what I've done over the years. But I was always, I mean, for me, it seemed to be that if you're going to be an entertainer, that there was no point in being a niche entertainer. That I wanted to be as popular as possible. That I wanted to be big time. You know, I wanted to be on the telly, you know, in the cinemas, you know, and playing the big venues. You know, that while still not diluting the kind of the strangeness and the left wing politics of my act.
Well, I think you've certainly kept true to this. My opinion, anyway, certainly kept true to that. And I mean, in that journey, you say that a lot of people go on. They sort of become more right wing and reactionary as they get older. I mean, I like you. I mean, I've been going in the opposite direction. I mean, I remember reading what Harold Wilson once said about Tony Benn. He said he immatures with age, and I think maybe that's me. I don't know whether that applies to you as well, Alexei, but that's a good thing. I mean, you know, stay young at heart, eh?
Yeah, no, I've stayed.
I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, as we saw when Jeremy was elected as the leader of the party, there's a real appetite for the sort of politics that, you know, that he was advocating out there. And, you know, I don't know if you saw that thing with Giles Brandreth looking for secret socialists in Guildford in the home counties. And he was stopping these people on the street and asking them if they thought we should get rid of tuition fees and bring the railways back into public ownership and kick the privateers out of the National Health Service, etc. Clamp down on tax evasion and so on. And they were universally, all of them, saying, absolutely. And he was saying, well, you're a secret socialist then. And they were saying, well, what do you mean? And he's saying, well, these are the policies of Jeremy Corbyn. He had a clipboard with him where he was asking these questions. He turned it around, there's a big picture of Jeremy, and they kind of stood back, you know, some of these people. Yeah. But the point about that was, though, I mean, obviously, the press had got to work in demonising Jeremy, but the policies were popular. And just to kind of get into the politics a bit now, I mean, I saw you on Socialist Telly earlier part of this year. It might have been back end of last year. I can't remember now. But you were saying then that you were more hopeful about the prospects for an alternative socialist party now. I mean, are you still hopeful and optimistic about that?
Well, to a degree, I was never that interested really in parliamentary politics. It was only really Jeremy. I never really knew much about the Labour Party apart from really kind of not liking it, which I think is probably in a way justified. But so it was only when Jeremy became leader of the Labour Party that I took an interest really both in parliamentary politics and in the Labour Party. But I mean, so given that since he's gone, I still in a way remain. I'm more interested in democratic politics than I was in a way. I mean, I think I was partly because he just started that, whatever it's called, Truth and Justice Foundation. I thought that there might be a point there where, the Socialist Campaign Group would have the courage to break away and form a kind of socialist party. Really, that's obviously failed to materialise. So, but I was talking to Kerry Ann Mendoza at the the Canary, who's a friend of mine. I think you know as well. And she was saying that there was a lot of interest in, and which kind of makes sense really, that there was a lot of interest in that the way forward might be in terms of local parties. Small parties that are kind of in a sense based around, regional groupings. They're not national parties. And because I do think the idea of the national, I don't know whether your party is, I don't know if I'm traducing your party, whether it's a national party.
Well, we haven't set a party up yet, Alexei. We are going to determine that at the conference that you're going to come to. You agreed, if you remember, in October. But yeah, we're going to put it to the members as to whether or not we should start the process to register as a political party.
It was an interesting idea that you have that possibly you could a way around the various. That a national party is too unwieldy. In a sense, it attracts the wrong people because it attracts people who are interested in power, but if it makes you vulnerable really to the mainstream media. But perhaps if you could have various local parties, but all the socialist parties, and obviously the Northern Independence Party seems to be a kind of prototype for that. That it seems I did Socialist Telly with Thelma Walker, who seems lovely really, who's their candidate in Hartlepool, and they I don't, they seem very light on their feet. There's a lot of humor in their campaign. And I wonder whether, if you're working on a local level, I mean, one of the things it seems maybe did for Jeremy was all this kind of this targeted Facebook advertising, these smears. And one of the only ways, if you're just working in a local neighborhood, if you can talk to everybody, and personally meet them and convince them that you're not a demon as a socialist, then maybe that's the way forward. I don't know really. I thought I was very taken with the idea when Kerry Ann talked about it really. And I'd certainly Northern Independence Party do well in Hartlepool, I think.
Well, me and all. I mean, we've endorsed the Resist Movement for a People's Party, which is our organisation. We've endorsed her overwhelmingly. Actually, we asked members, and they overwhelmingly.
Yeah, she's lovely. I mean, she's really. I mean, she also embodies. I mean, one of the things I talk about on my podcast as well is just how. One of the things that I just, it's just how horrible people are on the right wing.
Oh, tell me about it.
The Labour Party, but just horrible people, and whatever mistakes we make, people on the left are nice people, and I think Thelma seems to embody that. That she seems like an extraordinarily decent person. So.
What I mean, one of the things that we're hoping, well, I'm hoping certainly anyway, remains to be seen what our members decide. I was actually against establishing a political party initially because I felt the most important thing was to build a grassroots movement. But what I've suggested is that what we need, a bit like what you're just saying there, really, Alexei, is that we need to find a way on the left of outside the Labour Party working in collaboration with each other. Because the thing, and you'll know this from, I think, your history in the movement, the thing that we're brilliant at is pointing out the failings of other left-wing factions, and we spend all our bloody time criticising them because they're not pure enough, rather than recognising actually there are a lot of more things that we agree with each other on.
Yeah.
And I've said that if we're going to have any chance of success electorally, and as I say, I don't think we should put all our eggs in an electoral strategy anyway, although obviously an electoral strategy is important. We've got to start bloody finding a way of how we can of collaborating on the left. Do you think there's any hope for that? Do you think there's any hope for that?
I always say, well, when I was a Maoist when I was very young, and the people that I was in an organisation called the Communist Party of Britain, brackets Marxist-Leninist, and the CPBML, and the people we hated more than anybody else in the world wasn't, the Tories or the fascists or the Labour Party. The people we hated more than anybody else was the Communist Federation of Britain, Marxist. We hated them. They were. I mean, the first time I saw the Life of Brian with that, People's Popular Front. You've got to say, that was us, particularly on the Marxist-Leninist left. So I guess probably. I mean, I suppose. If in a sense you're not competing nationally, so if you're just the Derby People's Party, then if the Leicester People's Party, you're not directly competing with them. If you have ideological differences, they don't feel they're not as pointed if they're just a sister party to you, as it were, and so perhaps it doesn't, if you're locally based, then there's not the same, if you're a national party, then you're competing for the same small, pool of people in a way. So there's an inclination to be competitive. If you're only based in your area, then you don't have the same impetus to create ideological differences, I think. So perhaps, that local party idea might help with that. The collaboration,
I guess, and even a national party needs to, in my opinion, anyway, it should be like a federated structure so that people can come up with, be guided obviously by the underlying values and principles, but find their own solutions in their own local area. I think that's a key thing. One of the things I was really keen on when Jeremy talked about this community organising that the party was going to get involved in, never really kind of did it effectively, and they were being undermined anyway, as we know. But I think that's the way to go, I think, and hopefully if we can pull that off, then who knows? I mean, all those people that were inspired by the agenda that Jeremy put forward, haven't disappeared into the ether. They're still around, and I guess it's trying to find a home for them, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was, I always think that's my audience, and also, that's one of the great scandals of the demonization of the left, really. That I think of, I talked about it on my radio show about, those, I think of, those 2 million people who marched against the war in Iraq, and then there's another million people who were going to march against the war in Iraq, but they had to go to Morrison's first to buy some coriander, and then you know what the car park's like in Morrison's. By the time you got out the car park, the coaches had left. So you've got a kind of constituency. You've got a kind of constituency of 2, 3, 4, 5 million people who have progressive, internationalist, socialist ideas, and at the moment, apart from my radio show, they're completely locked out of, which is fine by me in a way. Sorry, there's a tip. Young comedians, if you're thinking of going on a left-wing podcast, don't eat nuts just before you I like to kind of inspire young comedians and give them little tips.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one.
Apart from being a socialist, I would say don't eat nuts before you go on a podcast because they get stuck in your gullet, which is what's happening to me. So
and you end up coughing and sniffling.
Our opinions are shared by millions and millions of people who are completely locked out of the discourse at the moment, are demonized as racists and fascists, and it's unfair.
Well, I mean, it is, and many of the people that were targeted, of course, are long-standing anti-racist. I mean, I was active in the Anti-Nazi League, for example, in the 1970s, and I was a bricklayer an apprentice bricklayer. We used to get, casual racism was quite a thing in the 1970s, and you get racist, comments on the building. So I'd always challenge it. I nearly got my head kicked in more than a few times. And then, fast forward 40 years, and then I'm being demonized as an anti-Semite. And that's because I wouldn't bow down to the Zionist lobby, and I wouldn't abandon people who had been falsely accused of anti-Semitism. People like Mark Wadsworth, the black activist who spent his life fighting racism, introduced Nelson Mandela to the Stephen Lawrence family, was instrumental in the black section. In fact, he led the black section movement in the Labour Party, instrumental in getting the first black MPs elected to Parliament. His whole bloody life is kind of defined by anti-racism. Yeah. He's accused of an anti-Semite, and people like Cyril Chilson, who I've mentioned on previous programmes, whose parents both survived Auschwitz. He was ousted from the party, accused of anti-Semitism. And, Jackie Walker, people, I just wouldn't, I couldn't. I thought, people say, it's important, keep your platform. I said, well, what's the point of having a platform if you're not going to use it to stand up for people? Yeah. What's the point of us being there, And that's what really kind of, got me. And it was because I think Jeremy was seen as a threat, both internationally in terms of his anti-imperialist stance and his support for the Palestinian people in particular, and obviously a socialist program at home. And so there was very, very powerful forces. And because I was riding in and talking about democratizing the Labour Party and making MPs accountable to the members, that was an anathema to them. They couldn't tolerate that. And so I was, number one target. And then they used every dirty trick in the book to get me out. And in fact, somebody told me they overheard a group of these characters, these right-wingers, talking in the tea rooms, saying, we want to get Williamson expelled as payback for the Democracy Roadshow, because I was going around the country speaking to packed meetings, and there was overwhelming support for that. And frankly, sadly, the trade union leadership and Jeremy actually didn't have their courage or the convictions, and they didn't push those democratic reforms through, and that's what killed him in the end. Yeah, in my opinion. Anyway,
it didn't even bleed in work, for Jeremy and John. And if sacrificing you, much as I love you, Chris, and Jackie and Mark Wadsworth, if it had worked, if in some way you could have been thrown under the bus, as to appease the Israel lobby, and then they go, all right, you've thrown, top hat, chapeau to you, sir. We'll stop now. We'll stop with all this, this weaponized anti-Semitism. But of course they didn't. It just, because they're bullies, it just encouraged them to go further and further and further. Yeah. And it was never going to work, sacrificing. It just, it was just, was just a terrible mistake from the start, really, and just encouraged.
Absolutely. I mean, it did. It certainly did. And, the attack on Ken Livingstone, who was the first really high-profile victim. Yeah. I mean, Ken, bloody hell, again, another person defined by his anti-racism. I mean, he led the charge, didn't he, on the GLC? I mean, I think in many ways he's probably done more than virtually anybody in a public position to advance the cause of of anti-racism through his role on the GLC or the Greater London Council, what they did. So just in terms of that whole Corbyn project, because it did create a wave. It created a massive kind of sense of optimism that change was really possible within the Labour Party. What do you think went wrong? I mean, why did the Corbyn project sort of tank, do you think?
Well, because I'm not. I mean, I should. I mean, in a way, first of all, I should, define my role. I mean, I do I do these podcasts and a bit. But when you refer to me as an activist, in a way, ultimately, it's something that I resist really, because my role, is as a comedian, so is to be funny about stuff. Is not
to.
Of course, yeah. From time to time, because I like, I like doing like these podcasts like yours and Socialist Telly and stuff, but I resist the impetus to go further, because it's it's my job to kind of, in a way, stand on the sidelines and sneer, really. But that's an important thing, because the comedians are the ones who point out that the emperor isn't wearing any clothes. Yeah. We're the ones who're supposed to. I said on my podcast. My podcast is a place where I speak truth to power, and I also talk Spanish to a duck.
Yes.
Hola, señor Pato, ¿qué tal? So but yeah. I mean, so I resist, in a way. My role is, and I have obviously ideas about what works and what doesn't. My main role is to express that in terms of comedy, rather than any kind of helpful.
Yeah.
So I mean, what went wrong? I don't know. In a way, it's not for me to say. As I say, it's my job is just to stand on the sidelines and just make fun, really.
Well, talking about your comments about the emperor not having any clothes, there's a character now who start bollock naked, isn't he? And there's the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer. What's your take on him? We talk about an emperor with no bleeding clothes. God Almighty!
Yeah,
I never support him. I could see through him right from the outset, and he was one of the ones that was throwing me under the bus. And what he did to his role in Julian Assange and the whole gamut of stuff when he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, etc. But what he claimed in his leadership pitch was complete fantasy, totally false. And what we've got is a very opposite. So a lot of people, notionally on the left, thought, we're the Corbyn, Corbynism without Corbyn. Well, it's never going to bloody happen with Keir Starmer, and so it's proved to be. I mean, what's your thoughts on? I've heard you say one or two things, but let's for the benefit of our viewers, just give us your.
I have to say that he's actually my MP. So if I've got a problem with my pins, my is right to the bottom of the pile, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I've got a complaint about dog mess on the pavement, that's not getting attended to. My MP is not going to. The things I've said about him, I've really, given that he's my MP, you think you've suffered, in terms of your political beliefs. I also have suffered trying to open my pavement falafel stall, which is anyway. So, I never. Obviously, you had a much closer, relationship with him. You saw him at work, really. I did a thing. One of the weird things that I think I did that I mentioned on my podcast was that he's in this thing called the Trilateral Commission. That he was the only MP who was invited to be a member of the Trilateral Commission. And the Trilateral Commission, it's not a secret organization, but the late David Graeber, I think, wrote about it. But it is an organization that's founded by wealthy, figures. David Rockefeller, I think, Brzezinski, who was, I think, Carter's, but a kind of security advisor, and it's got very strong links to the security services and banking, and it's an organization, from what I understand of their prospectus, believes that there is too much democracy, that really the democracy just needs to be managed. And Keir Starmer is a member of this bleeding organization, the only MP who's, what? It's never mentioned, but I think that it's also that, again, I'm sort of repeating my point, but, people, people call him a human rights lawyer. Well, that was a long time ago when he was that, wasn't he? I mean, I always say it's like Hitler was a barman, but you don't say former barman Adolf Hitler. It's like
No, indeed, yeah.
it's he's done a lot of really bad things since.
Well, he has. I mean, then and since.
I
mean, the police crime sentencing and courts bill. He's did. I think. Well, I'm not sure if they in the ended up did oppose it, but he didn't want to oppose that. Where people protesting, if they cause a serious annoyance to somebody, they could find themselves being charged with a criminal offence. But more serious than that, of course, was the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Act, as it is now, the Criminal Conduct Act, which gives, on the face of the bill now, I mean, I guess they were doing this anyway, but now they legitimizes criminal conduct by the security services and the police. And the various criterion, in fact, I wrote it down to it. The criterion for it, criminal conduct authorizations necessary on the grounds if it's deemed to be in the interest of national security, if it's for the purpose of preventing or detecting a crime, you might say fair enough, but also if it's in the interests of the economic well-being of the United Kingdom. Well, my idea of what's in the interests of the economic well-being of the United Kingdom and your idea of what's in the interests of the economic well-being of the United Kingdom is entirely different to the likes of Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and the neoliberals who hold sway at the minute. And Starmer whipped his MPs to abstain on that. Yeah. And they did at least put down some amendments, but it's even more egregious when you think about it that he abstained on the bill or whipped his members to, because the amendments were to exclude explicitly the right of the security services and the police to commit torture, rape, and murder, and that was voted down. So by implication, then, that everything's on the bloody table, and they abstained on it. What is going on? I mean, it's a shocking state of affairs, isn't it?
It is really. I think I said on Socialist Telly, I was in it's my fault because I was in a charity football match with him a couple of years ago. And probably could. I mean, he's actually good at playing football, but if I could have kind of gone through with a hard tackle, I could have.
You could have done. He could have done us a great favour. Although the trouble is, it would have been replaced by someone else equally as appalling. Yeah,
but it's hard to know really whether. I don't know whether it's incompetence or whether his job is to kind of dismantle the Labour Party, or whether it's just that thing of making it a kind of bland version of the Tory Party. I don't know what you think, really. What his ultimate project is, really.
Well, I mean, I think in reality, the Labour Party, if I'm honest, and I was a member of it for 44 years, but ever since its inception, or certainly since the extension of the franchise in 1918, has been used as a tool of the establishment to give a few crumbs from the table, as it were. And that's why I think I was so encouraged with Jeremy. I was encouraged when Foot came along, but particularly with Tony Benn, actually, in the wings when he was going for the deputy leadership. But of course, they were demonised, just as Jeremy was demonised. And any time that a party seems to get close to getting somebody and a programme which is, really going to transform and tackle the major issues affecting people in the country. 14 million people, let's remember, in this country are in poverty, in the fifth biggest economy in the world. We've got people sleeping on the streets in every town and city, and all those kind of problems. Precarious employment's endemic. It shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. And where's the Labour Party in actually arguing for that? That's the problem. And I mean, under Blair, inequality got worse. It is a problem. So I think he's sort of returning the party to the a safe pair of hands, as it were, a kind of Tory party mark too. And
you can see the Labour Party has always been a device whereby the socialist impulses of the British working class was siphoned off into kind of endless, pointless meetings, really, and kind of I refer that motion back to my executive committee, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
indeed.
It's a composite motion that I'm referring to. On Thursdays, I usually stick my head in a bucket. I mean, it's whether it's in fact to tie the working class down, to siphon off there into kind of managerial, into kind of endless kind of process, really, and you could see its function is to ensure that nothing ever happens really radical, and
it's become very managerial. Absolutely. I mean, I was leader of the council in Derby for a number of years, and we were trying to, sort of fly the flag of municipal socialism still. And in the teeth of the new Labour government, I mean, there was no real support for that, and they've hollowed out local government. The days of the GLC and Lambeth Council and Liverpool and Claycross up the road from me a bit before that. Labour in local government was a real bastion, actually, and a real bulwark, actually, against Thatcherism in the early days. But that's all kind of gone now. I don't really see that anymore. And there are opportunities. That's one of the things that we've been pushing as our movement, which we hope to ratchet up a bit now that the lockdown seems to be lifting, in terms of pushing local authorities to be doing more than they are doing at the moment. But I don't think there's much of an appetite.
I mean, it is, it does, we kind of think we live in a democracy, but if you think about, when the GLC presented a kind of socialist alternative to Thatcher, she just abolished it. I mean, how undemocratic is that? How Soviet, how South American is that? When rather than saying, well, there's a parallel, there's a movement here, there's a city that's presented a different example. Maybe I'll exist alongside, and I kind of accepted it at the time. But you just think that's breathtakingly undemocratic.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
Because you challenge conservative wisdom that she abolished it, staggering. And, I think that the idea that we live in a kind of that challenges the idea that we live in a democracy, really, because, and it's also, I mean, it was a shock to me. I mean, in a way, I've found the last few years of the kind of dismemberment of Jeremy, artistically, I found it as a kind of spare, really, because it made me so angry, really, and it obviously makes my audience angry as well. But also, even I was shocked about how all the elements of the establishment, every level, were kind of used to destroy. To smear Jeremy and socialism in general, and also obviously all the most comedians went along with it as well. I was surprised that how kind of coward the show business was. I mean, who believed that the people in show business could be cowardly?
Yeah, well, it was depressing. It was depressing. It really was, and. But going back to Ken, Ken demonstrated that. He was absolutely pilloried by, you'll remember this, obviously, we're a similar age, you and I, Alexei, are slightly older than me, but he was absolutely pilloried in the gutter press on a daily basis, but he didn't buckle, and he became like a folk hero in London, very, very popular. And he was, this was at the height, wasn't it, of the IRA campaign, and he was brokering discussions with Sinn Féin and so on, and was getting pilloried for all that. So he was pushing about it. Like I was saying it on, he was using his platform for a purpose, not just to kind of draw a salary or for the status such as it is. Yeah. And the only way they could stop him was, like you say, was to abolish the GLC.
Yeah, they actually abolished it. They abolished it. You think a lot of the things that the GLC was pioneering, like, anti-rape, they are kind of very strong strain of anti-rape.
Absolutely,
and gay rights, feminism, stuff that's now accepted, but in the thinking tabloid press at the time was, excoriated for the, for the GLC's kind of pro-gay policies. It was lambasted for it, and now this is stuff that is perfect, is part of the kind of fabric of conventional life, really. And
well, one of the responses to that, Alexei, you'll remember, was Section 28, wasn't it? Where this was the thing about clamping down on talking about sexuality and gay relationships in schools. In case it will infect the kids. It's absolutely bloody disgusting. But I think that was a kind of right-wing response to the sort of stuff that and it wasn't just Ken, obviously. I mean, on the GLC, others were doing it. It was a weird time, really. But I think in many ways we're in a worse position now. I don't know what you think. Just before I bring Lizzie in to get reaction from our audience. As I've said, we're a similar age, you and I, Alexei.
I mean, you look a lot better than me. I think you're vegan diet.
It's the vegan diet, comrade. That's it. The vegans are going to inherit the earth. The vegans will inherit the earth. Let's be clear about that. Yeah.
You wouldn't think you were 86. I mean, you are. You're an amazing.
Next birthday, mate. It's not till next year. I'm not 86 until next year. What are you talking about? Anyway, no. We are a similar age, and I just wondered, just before I bring Lizzie in, though, if you could just give us your thoughts on how you think the challenges facing us today compare with the political challenges, and artistic challenges, I suppose, that you were confronting when you were kind of starting out, in the kind of 70s and the 80s. Is it? Well, it's certainly different, I think, but is it more problematic? Is it more difficult? Were they more deep-seated then, or how do you think? What's your perspective on that?
I think we're in a much darker time now. I think that things are, they'll if you say the wrong thing politically, they'll go after your job. They'll go after. There are coordinated campaigns to attack people. It's much more problematic. I think the media is more cowardly than it used to be. I mean, and I have to say, although BBC. I have to say that BBC Radio 4 have been absolutely fantastic to me. I mean, they are a marvel, and they've always encouraged me. And so, I can, in a sense, I'm whining about being excluded from the media while having a radio show that goes out to 4 million people. So, there's an element. But I think by and large that we do live in a much more vicious kind of ideological climate now. It's very problematic, really. It's not in your one of the things, in my day it was, in the 80s it was in your interest to act left wing. It helped your career. I'm not sure it does anymore, really.
One thing. Yeah. I was just going to say, Alexei, the one thing though, which is encouraging, is that the way in which people mobilized just this week against the Splitty Super League nonsense, it just shows that the power of solidarity, when people come together and recognize that the strength that they have in their own hands by linking arms and sticking together, the old Labour movement maxim, unity is strength. It really is strength. And that's demonstrated it. If only we could kind of bottle that and use it for wider goals, for greater good.
The one thing, the left's got to, learn some bleeding lessons from this, because it's not, the old ways of working don't work, really. No. It's got to, you kind of carry on with the same old kind of boring kind of proceduralism and jargon, kind of 19th century kind of, attitude that hasn't changed since Marx and Engels, or you find new ways, light-footed ways to do it, because it's not gonna, the old ways are not gonna work. So if lessons are learned, then that's the only point of a defeat, really, is to learn the lessons and not do the same stupid crap again, really. Whether the left is capable of that or not, we will see.
Well, we're going to do our best to try and encourage that using our good officers, such as they are. We've got several thousand members. We are still a small acorn at the moment, but giant oak trees grow from small acorns, don't they? We hope to grow a forest. So let's see how that goes. Listen, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for coming on, Alexei. Really appreciate that. It's been great to have you. Yeah. Keep doing what you're doing, comrade. Have you got any great plans for the summer now that we're hopefully out of lockdown? Or
no, I'll have to think about that I'll have to think about live shows. I don't think it's going to be possible this year. There is, I think, the very pinnacle of my career that's happening in May. I can't reveal any more than that. But
oh, well, there you go. Another teaser.
big goddamn thing for me. Thing I've been wishing for 20, 30 years. It's going to happen in May. So,
well, we'll look out for that. We'll look out for that. And we'll look forward to seeing you, Alexia, at our conference on the 16th of October.
Is it virtual, or do you have to go somewhere?
Say again, sorry?
Is it virtual?
No, you have to go. No, we're hoping to have it actually. No, not in Derby. No, it's going to be in Nottingham. Just up the road.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say it's in central London.
No, mate, no. Well,
Derby, it's fine. It's in Nottingham.
Yeah. Well, it's fairly straightforward to get to, comrade. But I mean, well, we didn't want to do another thing in London. Everything happens in London, we just sort of thought, let's because we're trying to be a grassroots movement. We're trying to kind of reach out into the heartlands and so on. So we just thought, and it's a great venue that we've got. It's a supporter, and of course, one of the things that we have to be mindful of, as you probably know, there are always attempts whenever I speak anywhere, and there were various other people that are going to be speaking at the event who similarly suffer from this, where there's efforts made by the Zionist lobby to force the proprietors to withdraw permission. I mean, it's happened lots of times. In fact, on one occasion, we had to hold a meeting in the open air after various venues were, they threatened a worldwide ban on the Holiday Inn. And they even went round, believe it or not, they had a online social media campaign against them, abusive telephone calls. And then two people, believe it or not, turned up in person at the Holiday Inn and made the Holiday Inn, the receptionist, an offer they couldn't refuse. And basically, a sort of threat that, they would be sorry if they allowed the venue, if they allowed the event to go ahead, use the venue for my event, So we ended up having it at the open air. But anyway,
it's so
that won't happen. That won't happen though, because as I say, the person that owns these premises is a good, solid ally, and it doesn't matter what the Zionist lobby or anybody else for that matter does. The event will go on. COVID notwithstanding, of course, But anyway, that's the end of the show, Alexia. It's been brilliant. It's gone very, very quick. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you've enjoyed tonight's show, and I hope you have, please subscribe to us. Hit the like button and the bell icon. That helps us, and it helps to ensure that we can reach an even wider audience. So thank you very much indeed for watching this evening. We'll be back next week at the same time, same place, 7 o'clock on Wednesday. So look forward to seeing you then. Thanks a lot and good night.